We take a look at Israeli casualties sustained so far during the operation in Gaza. Hamas is taking on Israeli tanks at very close range, and they put forward a 10-part peace plan to end the war. What's going on, everyone? Let's take a look at some updates as it relates to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. I'm recording this at 7 a.m. Central on Sunday, November 5th, 2023. Overnight, Israel says that they have now struck over 2,500 targets during the ongoing war. That's a mix of Hamas terrorist infrastructure in Gaza, as well as Hezbollah facilities to the north of Israel in southern Lebanon. Now, I'm going to pull up a website here that Israel has started to update pretty regularly, showing the names of Israeli soldiers killed so far. And what we can see here is that 6 names are added over the last 2 days. It's worth noting that one of these on the screen here is from October 7th. They're still identifying bodies and those that were killed in that massacre, 4+ weeks ago. Now, this list is going to be somewhat delayed. They wait to notify families, as we do in the United States, wait to notify families in private before putting the names and images of those killed in action out into the public domain. Now, shifting over to some Hamas videos that have come out over the past couple days, a couple that I thought were worth showing here, just to show the tactics being used right now in and around Gaza. So this first one, they do continue to show a lot of footage of the tunnels, which I think is interesting. Very interested in seeing what those look like. And kind of surprising that they show some footage from the tunnels as the fighters pop out, because I think it kind of gives Israel an idea of where those tunnels might actually be located. But either way, we've got one here where Hamas is moving right up, like 10 meters away from an Israeli armored vehicle and firing an RPG at point-blank range. I'm not going to show the detonation for a couple reasons. For one, the explosion tends to be what gets videos taken down, so there's no value in showing it because it gets taken down either way. And then personal stance, I just don't like showing the point in time when a human life is taken. So when an RPG strikes a vehicle, an IED goes off, or a bomb strikes a building, personally, I don't like showing that and presenting that out into the world. It did happen in this case. So the vehicle was struck. The video cuts off at that point, so it's not clear if it deflected the round, if the soldiers inside were able to survive. We got another video here showing an Israeli bulldozer that was destroyed, and you see Hamas fighters moving onto the bulldozer, planting their flag on top of it. So a quick note on a lot of these losses that are being reported or not being reported from the two sides. You got to take it all with a big grain of salt, right? So in the case of the bulldozer here, we see it definitely was destroyed or at least pretty severely damaged. But in other cases, the video cuts out, and we don't know what the actual effect of that strike was. Just as a personal example, when we were in Afghanistan, we dealt with this a lot on both sides. So we would regularly intercept a Taliban communication saying that they killed 15 Americans after a rocket strike. But that rocket missed the base entirely, didn't wound anybody. But across Taliban channels, they're saying they killed, an entire squad. And conversely, regularly, we would drop a bomb on a Taliban outpost. There'd be 3 guys in there firing RPKs or RPGs at us, drop a bomb right on top, completely decimate the area, get ready to say that we'd killed 3 enemy fighters, and then 2 of them get up and run away, against all odds. So on both sides here, when Israel or when Hamas puts out these statements saying X number was killed, X was destroyed, whatever it might be, just take it with a grain of salt. Militaries tend to overestimate that number when talking about enemy losses. Now, there's an interesting piece in Al-Majara, which is a Saudi-owned publication, titled A Complete Guide to Iranian-Backed Militias in Syria. Now, it's a good high-level overview. I don't know that I'd call it a complete guide. There's a lot of details missing. Not necessarily their fault. These groups are intentionally vague. It's kind of how they were originally created in some cases, especially to the outside Western eye. So some good information. I wouldn't write it as the end-all be-all definitive source on these groups, but they did say that according to their research that over 100,000 total fighters in these Iranian-backed militias in Syria exist today. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights put that number a little bit lower, saying that number is closer to 65,000. And just a quick note, that does not include Hezbollah. That does not include Hamas, or Hezbollah in Lebanon, does not include Hamas in Gaza, and supposedly does not include the Iraqi groups in Iraq. But I think there's a little bit of overlap here because they do call some of them out. They mentioned that there are 16 total groups falling under the banner of Syrian Hezbollah, which is the largest organization they get into here. There are some non-Arab units fighting alongside the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps or the Quds Force. They say that is 8,000 total fighters between the Fedayeen Brigade, which are Afghans that have moved to Syria fighting alongside Assad and the regime forces, and the Zanabiyun Brigade, which are Pakistanis that have moved to Syria and also are fighting with Iran alongside Assad's regime forces. And then shifting into the Iraqi units, the numbers here they're just not there. They're very vague. A couple of them they throw out, in the hundreds, 100 to 400 fighters, but across the board, relatively unknown, just given the number of these groups. But they call out Iraqi Hezbollah, Al-Nujaba, the Sadr Brigade, which is made up of Houthis coming from Yemen, Al-Quds, which is made up of Palestinians, and the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is made up of, you guessed it, more Palestinians. So interesting resource. I'll link it in the description below so you can give it a read. It's a good starting point when getting into all these groups and looking at a handful of them that very well could be either already behind or could be attacking U.S. forces in the region going forward. Now, Hamas put out on Telegram, or their political bureau put out on Telegram, their stance, a 10-part plan on how to end the war in broader Israel. And I think it's worth talking about because at a high level, it's not crazy. None of this stuff is extreme. Hamas has kind of moderated their public-facing stance on the political side quite a bit since their original founding. Their original founding, they were talking about, we got to erase, Israel from the map. We have to kill all Jews. In their more recent charter, I think it was in 2017, they removed a lot of that language and tried to come across as much more of a legitimate political entity. That's how that reads here. And I think it's worth bringing up because as we sit here today, there's a lot of questions about what Israel's plan is after this operation in Gaza. So if they're able to eliminate or severely degrade Hamas's capabilities, what's next? And it's not exactly clear what Israel plans to do. So Hamas is filling that void, putting their plan out there. Kind of moving through this quickly. Starting out, they say ceasefire, you got to lift the siege of Gaza and begin negotiations to release all of the prisoners. They say you have to stop the forced displacement of Gazans, begin rebuilding Gaza under international supervision. You have to stop all Israeli settlement activities and stop the Judaization of Jerusalem. They call for an international solution for the state of Palestine and say that the Palestinian Liberation Organization will form a conference to represent all Palestinians on the world stage with a goal of ending the occupation, returning refugees home, and making Jerusalem the capital of the state of Palestine. And up until that point, which they give it a 1-year limit, it's pretty quick, all things considered, but then again, they are under siege, getting bombed every day, so I can understand the desire to make this happen fast. Until that point, they say Gaza will continue to be managed internally by Palestinians. So whether you think that those points are crazy or reasonable or anything in between, look, it's worth noting that one of the two warring parties here has thrown out their idea at a solution. I don't know that Israel is anywhere near, sitting down and negotiating with Hamas, but when you step back and look at the world stage, I do think this could strike a chord with a handful of countries around the world, looking and saying, hey, look, Hamas is trying to end this thing. Hamas is putting forward what it would take to stop this fighting and achieve peace in the broader region. So hopefully, Israel meets this and comes up with their own plan and lays out a very clear understanding of what their long-term plans are in and around Gaza. Now, shifting to kind of the broader picture here, Iran put out a very nice message to the United States. Their Minister of Defense said, quote, "Our advice to the Americans is to immediately stop the war in Gaza and implement a ceasefire. Otherwise, they will be hit hard." So hit hard probably from their militias in Iraq and Syria, where we continue to have a U.S. presence. This statement from Iran comes as U.S. Central Command announced that the Dwight D. Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group arrived in the Middle East to increase our regional posture there. Now, a quick overview of what these strike groups look like. The Eisenhower Strike Group consists of the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, the guided missile cruiser USS Philippine Sea, guided missile destroyers USS Mason and USS Gravely, and the Carrier Air Wing with its 9 squadrons and the Information Warfare Commander. Carrier Wing 3, known as Battle Axe, among others, contains 4 fighter squadrons comprised of FA-18 Super Hornets. A lot of firepower there in the Middle East in that one carrier strike group. But that's not the only one, because in the Mediterranean, we still have the Gerald Ford strike carrier group, which includes the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford, guided missile cruiser USS Normandy, guided missile destroyers USS Thomas Hudner, USS Rampage, USS Carney, and USS Roosevelt, along with Carrier Wing 8, which also contains 4 FA-18 Super Hornet strike fighter squadrons, as well as supporting aircraft. Look, that's a lot of coverage. The U.S. has the ability, just between these two carrier strike groups, not even including the forces we have on the ground and the air bases scattered across the Middle East, to strike numerous targets, sustained strikes against numerous targets in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, or potentially even Iran, if it comes to that. But that's all I got for now. Of course, if interested in national security subjects, be sure to check out the sit reps I put out on Substack. Link is in the description below. 7 to 10 of the top articles each week, along with a few podcast recommendations. But thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.